Hey there, welcome back. My name is Mike Mooney, and this is The Intersections. The reason we call it The Intersections is because there are four main areas of life that intersect inside you. They are spirituality, physicality, philosophy, and free thought. And there's a lot of synonyms that you can use to describe those four different things. Spirituality could be energy or consciousness, could be understanding of eternal reality, that which we call God. You also have physicality, which is your physical body, the part of you that the Bible considers to be the temple of the Holy Spirit, the part of you that interacts with this 3D reality that we call life, space, time. Then you have philosophy, which is really your perspective on life based on your substrate beliefs. And then free thought, which is not your perception and perspective like philosophy is, but it's your ability to connect to that which is you at the deepest level and bring forth something unique and new into the world. That's your creativity. Now, creativity or creative thought or free thought, which is one of the ways I prefer to talk about it, is different from philosophy, because philosophy is a box that we put ourselves in as we perceive reality and say, this is how I interact with it. But free thought is a totally different thing, because it's, instead of a box that we put ourselves in, it's a box that we reach into. So creativity or free thought is really an opportunity for us to get away from observing ourselves in a box and saying, this is how the world works. It's almost paradoxical. It flips that on its head and says reality is completely subject to what we contribute to it. And therefore, I can reach into this box of creativity and grab something that has never existed before, whether it's a thought or an idea or an imagination or a feeling, and I can bring that thought into reality. Now, what's interesting is our physical body is how we experience these things. If we have a philosophy, for example, where my philosophy is that everything exists the way it is, there's nothing I can do about it. It exists, and I have to figure out a way to move through this life with the least amount of pain, which is what most of us try to do. What we end up doing in that philosophy, which is what many people hold as a philosophy, what we end up doing is basically creating a construct where I'm subject to conditions, and those conditions shift. They go up, they go down. They're enjoyable or they're not enjoyable. They're desirable, they're undesirable. And so my philosophy, not mine particularly, but as most of us think, and we don't even realize we're thinking it, is that my philosophy is actually what's the baseline of how I choose to interact with my circumstances. But in free thought, what we are actually capable of doing it is really perceiving life as a sort of a tapestry of circumstances and conditions and people, where I don't have to just have my philosophy. I can actually change what I see. I can change what I want to see, and then I can add something to it to create a reality where what I want actually becomes true. And that's a philosophy as well, right? So my philosophy on everything, including myself, plays a huge role in how I conduct myself in the world. But then there's this other sort of materialistic view, which is that I can only contribute something to reality. I can only contribute the parts of me based on my brain and its ability to think based on what I've learned, or I can contribute my physical effort, my hard work. I can contribute my hard work, which is a very linear, it's 1 + 1 = 2 way of thinking. But then you introduce the other aspect, which is spirituality. The other intersection that probably changes everything about your life the most is spirituality, or understanding consciousness, or metaphysics, or energy, or however you want to describe that, an understanding of non-physical reality. And this is such an important aspect that many of us are looking for a spiritual reality to inform our body, right? We pray for healing. I want something spiritual to change the way my body is behaving and performing, or I want something spiritual to help me with my philosophy. So I'm going to read the Bible, or I'm going to read, the Quran, or any other ancient text. And people are looking for, is there a piece of information out there that is spiritually derived that can actually inform my philosophy and help me change the way I look at the world? And those are all good pursuits. Um, the challenge, I think, is that when we read an ancient text, we assume that the people who wrote that text actually have access to some information that we can only access through those writings. But the reality is, and this is a challenge for most people, I think, is to look at yourself as equal with the person who wrote that, whether it's Islamic or Buddhist or Hindu or Christian. Am I different than the people who wrote those texts? And this is where the intersections of the four main intersections that I talk about are so important, because I have the same body as them, and I have the same brain as those people. I have the same access to spiritual reality as those people, but I might have a different philosophy than those people. And my self perspective plays such a huge role. So if your self perspective is, there are people who have access to that, and there are people who, like me, can just read it, try to interpret the letter, like the actual writing that they wrote, and then I can take what I interpret from that and try to make changes in my philosophy or changes in my body or my spirituality. And I think we limit ourselves so greatly because we think that thinking is like tiers, almost like a caste system of thought, where certain people have access to extremely high thought, some people have access to lower thought, and other people have access to even lower thought, or the lowest thoughts, which would be unconsciousness probably. But the reality is that we all have the same access. There's no level of intelligence required. There's no philosophy that's a prerequisite. There's no physical condition that must be achieved. And there's really no free thought structure that can either enhance or inhibit your ability to access the same thoughts and the same understanding that any of the ancient writers had. You personally have the same exact access as the people who wrote every ancient spiritual or religious text in the history of the world. Now, what that means then is that those people who wrote all of that stuff, because you're just like them, means they're just like you. So they're not necessarily special in so much as there's nothing about them that leads them to having the interactions that they had, or the experiences that they had, that caused them to pen these writings that lasted for thousands of years. The reality is that you are just like them, and they are just like you. And if you can accept that, then you can access at the spiritual level, the consciousness level, the energy level, whatever you want to call it, you can access those exact same thoughts, those exact same, let's say, beings that are non-physical beings that we often call God, whether it's Jesus or anybody else. You have access to those beings. And if you have access to them, then you personally have a singular responsibility to yourself to engage everything that they know. So let's just take Jesus, for example, because we live in the United States. Well, if you're watching this, you might be anywhere in the world, but people in the United States are, by and large, inundated with Catholicism and Protestantism and the 50,000 denominations within each one of those. And so Jesus is sort of this central figure in the United States. Now, there's been a big departure in the last, I think, 30 years or so away from traditional Christianity, whether it's Catholic or Protestant. But just using Jesus as a main reference point, you're not different from Jesus. there are some things, according to the biblical understanding of who Jesus was, that you might say make you different. For one, Jesus, the Bible claims he was born of a virgin. You weren't born of a virgin, unless that's a metaphysical reality, not a literal reality. So maybe there's an understanding of what does it mean to be born of a virgin, meaning have a physical mother and a spiritual father. Well, metaphysically, you could say that the earth and the humans on it, which are made from earth, supposedly, according to Genesis, are your physical mother, and your spiritual father is the spiritual creative source of all reality. So you actually are born the same way Jesus is born. Now, obviously, we know that, in the literal translation of it, that Jesus had a physical mother, and she was supernaturally impregnated. I'm not saying that didn't happen. I wasn't there, so I don't know. You could say, well, Mike, you just got to take it on faith. Well, I accept that it's a possibility, but I don't necessarily accept that I have to have been born of a virgin to be the same as that Jesus character in the Bible. And the experiences that I've had, in full disclosure, I've had experiences with Jesus himself, supernaturally, metaphysically, mystically, however you want to call that. And many, many people have. People all over the world have had experiences with Jesus, and he sometimes appears as himself, and sometimes he does not appear as a physical being even, or I should say a human being. A lot of times he appears in a totally different way and communicates the same message of love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control, or long-suffering, or perseverance, self-control being the last one. So let's say you have access to all these beings. Where do you have access? You have access in your body, through your thoughts. You have the ability to think. And if you can think, then you have the ability to create thoughts. You also have the ability to receive thoughts. I could give you thoughts right now. There may be something I say that you didn't create. You're receiving a thought, and then your brain lights up, and all of the thoughts connected to that thought start to swirl and create new ideas inside your mind. Well, the same thing is true with non-physical beings like Jesus. He's a spirit. He lives inside the human body. All of the human bodies have access to this person who is a spirit being at this point. And that means that you can hear his voice. You can see what he sees. You can receive a thought from Jesus. You can receive a thought from a lot of non-physical beings who have emerged from physical into non-physical. And you can actually receive thoughts from people who are currently physical. So if you receive a thought from physical or non-physical, and that thought triggers new thoughts inside you, and you believe those thoughts, you allow yourself to actually participate at the emotional level in those thoughts, then your state of being is going to change. Because when you pair a thought, when you tie them together, a thought and a feeling, your head, your mind, and your heart both have neurons. They communicate, and you have coherence between those. And then what changes is your state of being. So this is kind of one of the major points I wanted to hit today, which is the whole point of the Bible is actually about your state of being. In Proverbs, it says, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. And then we see later in, I think it's 1 John, where it says, any man who's in Christ is one spirit in the Lord. And then we see where it says, and I can't remember where it's at right now, but it says, as he is, so are we on this earth. So let's take a look at a couple of these verses, these concepts. And I realize in the Bible, when we use the Bible, we get into proof texting and saying, well, that's what it says, but that's not what it means. Here's another verse that directly contradicts that, so you must be wrong. I know I'm going to get some of that stuff. And I just want to say to anybody who's coming at me, with sort of like disagreement, it's okay. We're going to disagree on some things. That's my point here, is not to get you to agree with me. My point is to get you to agree with you. If you can find inside you something that sets you free, it doesn't have to come from me or anybody else. It can come directly from you, as long as it's setting you free from the sort of bondage, for lack of a better word, to other people's opinions, and setting you free from anything that is an undesirable behavior set or thought set, mindset in your life. So this isn't about you or anybody following Mike Mooney. This is about you finding your freedom in connection to your spirit, which is inside you. So if we look at that verse in Proverbs where it says, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he, that's a state of being sentence. That concept is about your state of being, your isness, your asness. How are you right now? And there's obviously, you could have circumstances that are really bad, and you might say, well, my state of being is connected to that. Therefore, I'm sad, I'm depressed, I'm angry, or whatever the case may be. That isn't necessarily your state of being, because there's a difference between how you think here and how you think in your heart. As a man thinks in his heart, so is he. So becoming aware of what your heart thinks, which is to say, what is your heart? What does that represent? Your physical heart and the core of who you are on a grand scale, maybe, let's just say, an infinite scale. In this particular space-time moment that you exist with a conscious mind and a physical body, you have a state of being, and it's informed by a whole lot of factors, including epigenetics and the way that you were raised, and the environment in which you were raised, and your family and your friends and school, church, and all those things. But if that point of that verse in the Bible is that as you think in your heart, so are you, that is it's like permission to ask yourself, well, what do I think in my heart? And then can I, from there, once I have some sense of what I think in my heart, can I look at my reality of my life and say, well, I think maybe it's possible that the things I think in my heart are actually a reflection of how my state of being is. Is there a different state of being I can have by having different thoughts in my heart, in the core of who I am, my substrate beliefs, my substrate thoughts? So then we got this other verse that says, as he is, referring to Jesus, so are we on this earth. Well, as he is right now, he's a spirit being. He's in another dimension, another realm. I don't know what the frequency of it is, and I don't know what realm it is. I don't know if there's names for that. I mean, I know the Greeks called it Uranos. English got translated to the word heaven. But what is that? Where is that? Jesus said it was inside us. So if he exists right now, he has an isness, and we exist as he is right now. That means there's something more substrate to who I am than just my conscious thoughts. We can take these two verses and we can put them together and say, as I think in my heart, so am I. And then I can look at this other verse that says, as he is, so am I. So now I've got a little juxtaposition between how I think and how he thinks. Well, how do I find the gap? And this is, I believe, one of the powerful realities or concepts of the intersections is that spiritually you are just the epitome of perfection, the epitome of high frequency thought and high love and joy and peace. Let's just stick with those, love, joy, and peace, which are very similar feelings, very similar emotions, especially love and joy. So if we take that idea and go, it says that I am like him here on earth, and it says that as I think, so am I. And so what can I look at? That's a great question. What can I look at that tells me if my thought pairs, my head thoughts and my heart thoughts are coherent with each other? Are they thinking the same thing and feeling the same thing? And it would be easy if we could look in a mirror, right? Well, turns out you can. You can look at your life. Look at what's around you. I don't just mean the physical, but the construct of your actual life all around you is actually a mirror. And so if you look at your life and go, man, there's a lot of things here that are recurring issues that are undesirable, things I don't like, then it's really wise. Let's say it's really wise to look at that mirror and say, that's a reflection of who I am. So clearly, I have a dissonance between the thoughts in my heart and the thoughts that are available to me from the inside. So my body actually gives me the opportunity with my brain to have spiritual thoughts that are above my current thoughts in my mind and in my heart. So I can shift those thoughts. I can take higher thoughts, in which the Bible actually says that. It says metanoeo, depending on how you pronounce that. But in my Southern Illinois dialect, it's metanoeo. You can take higher thoughts, and you can allow those higher thoughts that are coming from inside your body. If you can open up to it spiritually, open your body, and your free thinking aspect of who you are will actually bring forth these new creative thought feeling pairs into existence in your body and allow you to move into a higher state of being. And when you move into that higher state of being, I can promise you, you're going to think and feel differently. And the mirror of reality around you is going to change. I've seen it happen. But you don't have to do this all on your own. And this is the thing I'll leave you with, because we're getting really long on this video. Ask for help. Ask non-physical beings for help. You can ask Jesus. You can ask God. You can ask angels. You can just ask. Because you're not going to get help from anybody who hates you. You're only going to get help from people who love you. Non-physical beings who love you. That's who's coming when you ask for help. So I hope this all made sense. I hope it resonates with you. I hope it provokes you. If it makes you angry or it makes you think that I'm a heretic or something, it's okay. As long as you're thinking, as long as you're putting in some effort into figuring out who you are and what you want and what you believe, then this is worthwhile 22 minutes. So anyway, thanks for showing up. We'll be back soon. My name is Mike. This is The Intersections. Have a great one.